I don't usually publicize other teachers, although I don't have any problem doing that if I think that what they are saying is useful and helpful. And I have mentioned, I obviously have talked about Rupert Spira here and talked about Muji and Eckhart Tolle. These are some of the standard people out there these days. And so recently, and those of you who have been attending the class know that I usually have a favorite person that I'm studying at any particular time. And the one who I've been studying recently has been this doctor out in Colorado, Angelo. And his book, Awake, It's Your Turn, I think is maybe one of the best books I've seen that really covers not just waking up, but covers how meditation fits into waking up. It covers how meditation extends itself beyond the formal practices, as far as waking up is concerned. And the other thing that Angelo DeLullo is his name, by the way, he's an anesthesiologist in Colorado who had an awakening experience about 25 years ago. But the other thing that he does in the way he speaks about it and the way he wrote about it is that he really normalizes waking up. And I've really been waiting to see if somebody does this the way he does it, because if you study enlightenment, or if you study awareness or consciousness, and you study it from the Eastern traditions, whether it be Zen or Hinduism, or even the non-dual teachings that are traditional, Sogen teaching in Buddhism, the Advaita Vedanta teachings, and so forth. You would get the impression from studying those teachings, and it's often said in those teachings that it's very rare for a human being to wake up. And then we have examples like the Buddha, and Jesus Christ, obvious people who woke up that were very considered to be a very rare experience. I mean, Jesus Christ became the world savior, right? I mean, and Buddha, there was it's not a religion, but there was a system of teaching and practicing called Buddhism that came after his awakening. But one of the things that Angelo was saying is that anybody can wake up. And this was something that I have considered to be the case simply because we are all of us are already what we are, right? All of us are already the awareness that we are. Therefore, it must be possible for you to be what you are. Doesn't that seem like to be common sense? It must be possible to be what you are. And if that's the case, then the question arises, if the point Angelo is making is accurate, then what explains the fact that so few people do experience awakening? And he actually gets involved in answering that question, because one of the things he gets involved in is if awakening is possible for all of us, for any of us, then are there practices, are there understandings, are there ways to prepare to approach that experience of awakening that can result in that experience occurring? We know that meditation is important. That's always been part of this, going back to the traditions. And meditation is important simply because in order for you to stand a chance to awaken, you got to deal with this noise up here. You got to deal with the fact that there is this machine in your head that is got a database and that is constantly talking, and it's narrating life, and it's talking about you, and it's talking about the past and the present and the future, and it's talking about other people, and it's neurotic, and it never stops, and it sucks up all your energy. And then the worst part of all is that you consider that voice to be your voice. So not only is it doing all of that, but it's you doing all of that. And therefore, part of the experience of having this voice is that you're crazy. And we don't, you don't, this isn't even something that a lot of people necessarily spend much time on in terms of considering themselves crazy, because we all hide from our own mental illness, don't we? We hide from our own mental illness because nobody wants to be thought of as being crazy. That's why people, until recently, very few people went to psychotherapy, because they didn't want to get stigmatized that somebody would find out and then they would be considered crazy. So this is the dilemma that we're in. We have this voice in our head that's going 24/7, doesn't stop to let us sleep, says terrible things about us, is neurotic, doesn't stop even when it's not necessary to think. It continues to do that. We call that the default state, continues to do that. So we need to do something to get some leverage. We need to do something to be able to quiet this down a little bit so that we can relax a little bit, and so that if there's something to see that we're missing, it becomes possible to see it because the static is reduced. And this is one of the key purposes of practicing meditation. To learn to relax the body. That in and of itself is worth the time, right? Just to learn to relax the body. That'll help your blood pressure go down, probably give you some extra life to live. You probably live longer if you practice it, right? You'll probably, and then the other thing that happens through practicing meditation is you start to experience a calming effect of the mind. It's often talked about in terms, if you take a jar of sand and you shake it up and then you set it down and you let it be still, gradually the sand or the dirt, if it's dirt, will sink to the bottom and the water will clear. And this is the same concept with the mind. If you sit still and you just get your attention out of the noise, because you're withdrawing the energy that it needs to exist, the noise will begin to calm down and it'll begin to be quieter when you're sitting. Now this will take time, right? And so you have to get past the initial challenge of practicing meditation, because when you first go to sit and meditate, you're just sitting there experiencing restlessness because you're sitting there with this mind that's just going constantly all over the place. And then one of the things that voice in your head will say when you're attempting to practice meditation is, I can't meditate. My mind is racing. It won't let me meditate. Of course, that is the mind. Right? So as you practice meditation, you start to learn not to listen to that voice when it comes to meditation, because it does not want you to sit still. It does not want you to calm down. It does not want you to go sane. That would ruin it. That would ruin it. Then you'd be the only sane one in your family, or you'd start behaving in a sane manner in an insane world and you wouldn't fit here anymore, right? Or the voice in your head, or the personality that is the source of that voice, might say something to you like, oh, if you take this too far, if you do this too long, you'll go crazy. If you take this too far and you do this too long, you'll become forgetful. You'll become some kind of spiritual creature. You won't be able to function anymore. You'll lose a lot of the things you love to do. You'll have to give up drinking. You'll have to give up smoking. You'll have to give up your favorite TV shows. You'll have to give up sex. You'll have to give up all the things that you do for pleasure and wasting time. The truth of the matter is, none of that's true. None of that's true. You don't lose anything when you practice meditation. Everything either stays the same or changes in a positive direction if you practice meditation. The question is, can you make it through the initial challenge of the practice when all the noise is there? If you stay with it and you do it consistently without fail, and you persist and you are sincere about this, you'll begin to notice the difference that it's making. And like I said earlier, when I was using Ellen as an example, how do you like being used as an example?
It's a good example.
I was sharing with them how you shared with me about how when you were walking today, you realized you weren't there, And I was sharing with them that that's an indication that she is succeeding in her practice of meditation. Not only succeeding in her practice of formal meditation, but now spontaneously she finds herself falling into an experience of meditation as she is out in the world moving around. That's what she meant when she said, I realized I wasn't here. That's waking up. That's called waking up and realizing that you're not present. You're living a life in your head. You're living a thought life. You're living a conceptual existence in your head. And for most of humanity, you don't know you're doing that. Not only do you not know you're doing that, but even after you practice meditation for a period of time, you'll still catch yourself doing it and didn't even realize you were doing it. Because until you practice meditation long enough, right, you won't know the difference. You won't know the difference because most people are living their entire life in their head. They wouldn't know if they weren't in their head. They wouldn't know the difference if they weren't in their head. That's why I say here, right? If you think you're not in your head, right, then when you're driving your car home tonight, at some point, make it a point at some point to stop and notice whether you're present in that car, on that road driving, or whether you're thinking about something. Now, if it's true, if what I'm asserting is true, which is that most human beings live their entire life in thinking, right? It means that they were never there for their real life. They were never there for their real life. They were in a thought life. They were in a conceptual life. They were thinking about the past and the future. And so they weren't there for their whole life. They missed their life. They'll miss their life. And until you get this, and until it sinks in, you don't know what you're missing. You don't know you're missing your life. You have to practice catching yourself doing this the way you just described. And then start to realize how often it's the case that you're doing this, right? And the only time when you're not doing this for most of us is when your attention is necessary to do what you have to do. Like if you're cooking a meal or you're doing something that really requires your attention, then you are present to the task that you're dealing with, right? But the neuroscientists tell us that's only about 30% of the time. The rest of the time, whether you know it or not, you're in the default state, which means your mind is wandering, which means you're not present, which means you're living a life in your head, which means you're living a life that's driven by fear, because a wandering mind is a fear-based process. It's a fear-based process, meaning that when you don't have anything to pay attention to, and when your mind is just wandering, fear is driving it. You're afraid of what might happen. You're afraid of what did happen, right? You're concerned. There's this underlying concern that's always going on. And so we go all over the place with it. You know, if you start paying attention, you'll see, oh my God, I hope this war ends. Oh, I hope my taxes go through without there being any problem. My car is in the shop. I have to go to see my doctor. I didn't sleep well last night. I'm hungry. I'm a little hot right now. What am I going to do tomorrow? Oh my God, I'm remembering what happened last year. This is the life that people are living all the time, and then they wonder why they need medication, right? You need something to stop this thing and control this thing, right? So, meditation can begin to calm the mind so that you have some space to see what's really going on. But as Angelo says, and I agree with him, meditation in and of itself is not going to cause you to wake up, and it's not going to cause you to be enlightened. It will cause you to be more relaxed. It will cause you to have a calmer mind. But then the other piece that has to start to get put into place is called inquiry. It's called inquiry, self-inquiry, meaning that if you're really interested in waking up, you have to start by asking yourself questions and then paying attention in such a way that you can start to see what the answer to the question is. This is not like going to school. It's not like asking a question and then reading a book to get the answer or going to a class to learn the answer. No. This is asking a question and then holding the question in your awareness and continuing to live your life in such a way that that life starts to provide an answer to that question. This is a different way of learning. This is called self-inquiry. And the question that we ask is, who am I? Right? Who am I? Because if you're going to wake up, the first thing you have to wake up to is who you are, don't you think? Don't you think that might be the best thing to wake up to first, is who you are? Now you might be thinking, well, that question doesn't mean anything to me. I know who I am. I have a driver's license. I know who I am. I can show you my ID. I can show you my picture. I know who I am. Look, you can see. I'm right here. This is me, right? And that's the way it is for almost all of humanity, right? There's only one problem with that. And for those of you who have been for a while, you've done enough learning or understanding or practicing to know directly that the little problem with that is it's simply not true. It's simply not true. That most of who people think they are, most people who think they know who they are have made a mistake. And for most people, they will never entertain the question. They will live their entire life being who they thought they were, right? Following the herd off the cliff, following the latest fashions, trying to stay ahead of things, trying to stay in control, trying to keep having enough money, you'll play the game of life from beginning to end and then die, right? And the tragedy of that is that for most of humanity, they will not have lived a human life. They will have lived a mental life and never have been in their own life. And that's a tragedy. If you understand that motivates you to want to get out of this mental state, right? But meditation can help you to do that, but only if you take on the other piece of the action, which is to start to pay attention to who you are, or start to pay attention to not knowing who you are. And looking to see, I'm here, there must be a me here, I'm here, right? So there is a me here. Maybe my understanding about who that is or what that is a misunderstanding, right? Because when I was a kid, I was too stupid to know the difference. They told me I was this body. They told me this was my name. They told me this was my personality. This is what you're good at, kid. This is what you're not so good at. Like that. And then you go to school and automatically you're in a room with all these other kids and you look around, right? And by then the voice in your head's already started, right? So you look around and say, oh, that kid's much prettier than me. Well, that kid's got nicer clothes than me. That kid's smarter than I am, right? And the neurosis begins, right? So you begin to become a psychotherapy patient at the age of 5, right? So the conditioning process tells you who you are, tells you what is real, tells you what is true. And you're too young and innocent and stupid to question any of it, so you take it on board and you begin to live that as your life. It doesn't go well. You begin to feel the stress of it all. You begin to feel the pressure of it all. You begin to feel that something's missing and you don't really know what it is. You can't put your finger on it. And then for people who are fortunate enough to come across these teachings and practices, when they hear about this, they say, that's what's missing. That's what it is. That's what's missing. I've been living my life up until now with a misunderstanding about the most important thing there is, what I am, who I am. So, if you understand the teachings and you practice meditation and you start to put it together, as Angelo says, you're now on your way to waking up. You're now on your way to waking up. And the more, and if you're serious about having that happen, right? And you want to know why don't most people wake up? It's because most people aren't serious about having that happen. It's as simple as that. Most people don't even know the possibility exists. And then the ones who do know the possibility exists, of that group, very few of them take it seriously enough to actually do what it takes to make it happen. What does it take to make it happen? You've got to start with formal meditation, right? To develop your habit of practicing that and to lessen the noise in your mind, right? And then you have to start to question your existence. You have to start to ask the question, what am I? Who am I? What is this? Right? And start to look to see, what's the answer that I can see for myself. I'm not interested in taking on a new belief. What's the answer that I can see for myself? Even if there are people who are teaching about this, they call these teachers pointers because they're not telling you something to believe. They're pointing to something that you can look at and see for yourself, and you don't have to believe it. Yes?
When you're in this process, this self-inquiry, is the first thing the realization, I am not who I am, and then it goes on to negative things, I'm not this, I'm not that? Is that how you get to the point where you have this awareness?
Well, that's one aspect of the practice.
I don't understand that. When you do that, are you saying, I am not who I think I am not this person, or whatever? You go through that list?
Well, that one of the traditional ways of practicing moving in the direction of waking up is called neti in India, and it's exactly what you just said. To start to practice noticing what you're not. Start to practice noticing what you're not, right? And the reason that that's a good approach, right, is because if you try and practice noticing what you are, you run into a dead end.
So it's okay to see the negative, saying, I'm not this, I'm not that.
Yeah.
That's not, okay.
Yeah. Yeah. And when you run out of things that you're not, you'll be who you are, right? And when you ask, is it true? The answer will always be the same answer because no thought is true. No thought is true. And if your life is based on all these thoughts that you think are true, then you're coming out of something that's not true and starting to see what is true. No thought is true. All thoughts are interpretations, right? The data comes in through the eyes, through the senses, goes to the brain, and then the brain uses all your past experience to make sense of the data and turns it into what you see and what you hear, like that, right? And thinking is an interpretation. It's taking the data and saying, let's see, based on the database, it seems like that's this. That's how it works. This seems to be that. I mean, because it fits my picture of that I learned, years ago, like that. Well, yeah, and that's one of the things that makes this process a little tricky, right? Because I'm telling you to move your attention away from thinking, right, to being aware of the breath. But at some point, what you're going to realize is what Brian just said is, yeah, but how do I live my life like that? How do I live my life without thinking, right? So that's further down in the chapters, okay? And that's one of the reasons why this book is a good book, because he tries to write the book in a way where he walks you through it in terms of why you should learn and pay more attention to attention, why you should learn and pay more attention to emotions. He breaks it down piece by piece in the book, right? So it's a very valuable and useful book. And by the way, Angelo has an online retreat coming, right, that I highly recommend. He's got a lot of stuff on YouTube. I've never seen anybody bomb YouTube like this guy. I swear to God. I mean, the first day I saw him on YouTube, the second day I was trying to find somebody else on YouTube. I mean, he started putting out these 10 and 12-minute videos on specific topics, right? And then he was also putting out these long hour-and-a-half interviews with Dr. Z and all that stuff. So there's tons of stuff out there. And he's a regular guy. He doesn't wear sheets. He doesn't wear robes. He doesn't talk Tibetan, none of that jazz. He talks like we talk, and he insists that if he can wake up, you can wake up. And there are things you can do that will really make it very probable that will happen. The question is, right, will you be able to manage going through the process and maintaining the degree of commitment necessary? That's the key. That's the key, right? And I know without asking Ellen that the reason that happened for her today is because she took my advice and started to understand if you want to wake up, you got to wake up in the morning and start meditating. And I don't mean formal meditation. You got to wake up in the morning and start paying attention as soon as you open your eyes. And notice the voice in your head started to live its day. Now, which day are you going to live? You see what I'm saying? You got to start paying attention, and you have to understand that this voice is insidious. it will use all kinds of clever things to keep you involved with it, right? It'll use emotions to keep you involved with it, right? And so you're going to have to pay attention, and you're going to have to keep moving your attention away from that back to what's actually happening around you in your life. And it's going to take a certain amount of practice for you to get to a place where that happens spontaneously. And when it does, now you're in a much more refined area of the practice, much closer to the experience of waking up. So this retreat is a 3-day retreat starting on June 15th. And it's only a couple of bucks. And, you know, one of the things I like about him is he's obviously not in it for the money. If he was, he wouldn't be charging what he's charging for this thing. Plus, he's a doctor, you know what I mean? He doesn't need the money, which is a good thing. I mean, that's one of the reasons that I'm doing what I'm doing, is because I can get away with, given my age and the fact that my career is over, I can pretty much shit on the floor. Really, you know what I mean? And that's a freedom. That's a freedom, you know what I mean? You can't do, you know what I mean? It's like Woody Allen said, I've been thrown out of better places than this, right? One of the things that's important about this process, if you haven't noticed, at some point you've got to make it your process, not my process, not Angelo's process, you know, your process. You got to take responsibility for yourself and your life.